house was too quiet. Emily had lived in this suburban street for nearly 8 years, but tonight felt different. Normally, the hum of the refrigerator or the faint creak of pipes gave her comfort, background noise reminding her she wasn't alone. But tonight, everything seemed still, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel had left hours earlier for what he called a last-minute business trip, muttering about meetings that couldn't wait. She'd kissed his cheek, though his skin had felt unusually cold, and watched him drive into the night. Emily curled up on the couch with a half-read novel in her lap. Words blurred on the page as her thoughts drifted. The loneliness wasn't new. Business trips had become routine. But something in Daniel's departure lingered in her chest like a bruise. His eyes hadn't met hers when he left. He hadn't even smiled. She replayed the moment again and again, trying to decide if it was her imagination or if something unspoken had cracked between them. Don't overthink it, she told herself. Yet the silence mocked her attempts at reassurance. A sudden creak overhead froze her in place. She set the book down slowly, ears straining. Another sound followed, unmistakable, the measured weight of footsteps crossing the bedroom floor above. Her throat tightened. She was certain she had locked the doors, she whispered as if speaking aloud might anchor her sanity. No one's here, Emily. It's just the house settling. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. The footsteps grew heavier, deliberate. She stood, her pulse hammering, and moved to the base of the staircase. The banister loomed above, swallowed in shadows. The upstairs hallway light was off, though she had left it on earlier. A chill raced down her arms. Emily grabbed her phone from the coffee table, her thumb hovering over the emergency number. She imagined what the dispatcher might ask. Are you alone? Do you hear the intruder now? Her voice would shake. She wasn't. Sure, she'd be believed. Her breathing quickened. She called softly, hoping for silence in return. Daniel, are you home? No answer. For a moment she thought she heard a door shut upstairs. She pressed her hand against her chest, willing her heartbeat to steady. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps ceased. The house fell back into its unnatural stillness. Emily didn't move. She stayed rooted to the bottom step, staring into the darkness above. Minutes passed, each one dragging like an hour. Slowly she climbed 2 steps, then 3, pausing to listen. The silence mocked her again, but this time it felt heavier, charged. Her mind raced. Could Daniel have returned early? He often said little about his trips, vague excuses, unexplained calls taken outside. What if he had come back and didn't want her to know? The thought chilled her more than the idea of a stranger breaking in. Emily whispered again, louder this time. Daniel, if that's you, say something. Still nothing. She retreated, unwilling to risk the shadows above. She locked herself, in the living room, pulling the curtains tight. The clock ticked toward midnight, every second punctuated by the echo of those phantom steps in her memory. She remained curled on the couch, phone clutched in her trembling hand, waiting for a noise that never came. And yet, deep down, she knew what she'd heard. Someone had been there. Outside, a car engine roared to life somewhere in the distance, fading down the street. Emily's breath caught as unease twisted into dread. Tomorrow she would discover that Daniel hadn't been where he claimed. The living room clock struck 1 in the morning when Emily finally drifted into a restless half-sleep. On the couch, the phone still rested in her hand, her body curled tightly against the cushions. Outside, the street was hushed, broken only by the faint hum of distant traffic. She startled awake at the sudden crunch of tires in the driveway. Her chest tightened. She hadn't expected Daniel back so soon. She moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see headlights cut across the yard. His car eased into place, the engine lingering before shutting off. For a few seconds, he didn't move. The figure in the driver's seat sat motionless, head bowed as though gathering himself. Emily stepped back quickly, heart racing. She hadn't imagined those footsteps upstairs, she was sure of it. Yet here was Daniel, returning like a man, with secrets etched into his skin. The front door clicked open. He stepped inside, the cold air rushing in with him. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair damp with sweat, and his eyes avoided hers. "You're still awake?" His voice carried an edge, strained and flat. Emily studied him, choosing her words carefully. "I couldn't sleep. You said it was a short trip." He dropped his briefcase by the door, avoiding her gaze. "Got delayed, meetings dragged on." The explanation sounded rehearsed, thin. She noticed the faint scent of smoke clinging to his clothes, not the sterile odor of cigarettes, but something harsher, like burned wood or ash. It pricked her senses, stirring unease. "You smell like fire," she murmured before she could stop herself. His head jerked up. "What? Your clothes?" she said softly. "Like smoke." Daniel forced a hollow laugh. "Car trouble, pulled over near a truck stop. They were burning something out back." Emily nodded, but suspicion took root. He had an answer too. Quickly, as though he'd been waiting for the question. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken tension. Daniel moved past her, heading for the stairs. His shoulders slumped, but there was a stiffness in his stride, a man carrying more than fatigue. She followed him with her eyes, every nerve in her body alert. "Daniel," she called after him, her voice sharper now. "Why didn't you answer my texts earlier?" He froze for just a fraction of a second before turning. "Battery died. You know how bad my phone's been." She wanted to believe him. Yet something about his tone, the flatness in his eyes, made belief impossible. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. The house smelled faintly of him now. Sweat, smoke, and something metallic underneath. He disappeared upstairs without another word, leaving her rooted at the bottom step. She whispered into the emptiness, "You're lying to me." The words dissolved into silence, but once spoken, they couldn't be unsaid in her mind. As she stood there, the echoes of last night's phantom footsteps clawed at her thoughts. For the first time, she wondered if they had truly been phantom at all. And for the first time, she began to fear that Daniel's secrets might be darker than she ever imagined. Emily woke to the smell of coffee drifting through the house. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, but the comfort it promised didn't reach her. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from a night spent on the couch, replaying every detail of Daniel's late return. He was in the kitchen, humming under his breath as though the tension of last night had never existed. She watched him from the doorway. His sleeves were rolled neatly, his movements precise, calm. The same man she had once loved for his steadiness now looked almost staged, as if each gesture had been rehearsed. "You're up early," he said without looking at her. "I didn't sleep well." Her voice was flat. He glanced at her with a smile, too quick, too polished. "You worry too much, Em. You always have." The words settled on her chest like a stone. Once he had said that with affection, teasing her for fussing over details. Now it sounded like an accusation, a dismissal. As she sat at the table, her mind slipped back to the early years of their marriage. The nights filled with whispered dreams, the mornings when laughter carried them out the door. Daniel had been attentive then, his eyes warm, his touch gentle. Somewhere along the way, those pieces had fractured, replaced with shadows and explanations that never quite fit. She studied him, searching for the man she once knew. Instead, she saw the distance between them, built from late nights, vague answers, and that lingering scent of smoke she couldn't forget. "Daniel," she said carefully, "where exactly did you go last night?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he forced a casual shrug. "Told you already. Meetings, car trouble. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself." Her stomach nodded. "I'm not accusing you. I just—" "But you are," he cut in, voice sharper now. "Every time something doesn't make sense, you turn it into suspicion. You twist it until I'm the villain." Emily flinched. Gaslighting, subtle but effective, always left her doubting herself. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe the footsteps, the smoke, the stiffness in his answers were just products of her restless mind. But deep down, instinct screamed louder than reason. "I'm just trying to understand you," she whispered. Daniel's expression softened suddenly, almost tender, as he reached for her hand. and I need you to trust me. We've been through too much to let paranoia tear us apart." His touch should have comforted her, but instead it felt like a chain tightening. He had a way of mixing reassurance with control, weaving guilt into his words so seamlessly she questioned her own reality. The kitchen felt smaller with him standing there, his presence filling the room like smoke. Emily pulled her hand away, focusing on the ticking clock on the wall. Each second marked the widening gulf between them. The day dragged on with strained normalcy. Daniel left for work, pressing a kiss to her cheek as though nothing had fractured. Emily stood at the window long after his car disappeared, her reflection in the glass pale and uncertain. She couldn't shake the thought. This wasn't just distance in marriage, it was something darker. Secrets were coiled beneath his calm, surface waiting to strike. That evening, as she sat alone scrolling through local news, a headline caught her breath. "Young woman missing in suburban neighborhood." The photo was of someone Emily recognized, someone Daniel had once spoken of in passing. Her blood ran cold. The cracks in their marriage weren't just personal. They were leading her into something much more sinister. The glow of Emily's laptop cast a pale light across the darkened living room. The article she had stumbled upon refused to let her go. A 24-year-old woman, Hannah Cole, had vanished 2 nights earlier after leaving a cafe downtown. Her smiling face stared back at Emily from the grainy photo, eyes bright with youth and trust. Emily's pulse quickened as she reread the timeline. Hannah had last been seen around 10 p.m., the same night Daniel had claimed to be at a meeting out of town. The same night Emily had heard footsteps in the empty house, followed by the strange return of her husband hours later, reeking of smoke. Her throat tightened. Coincidence felt like too fragile a word. She whispered to herself, "It can't be him. It can't." But even as she said it, images clashed in her mind. The hollow smile Daniel had worn, the smell on his clothes, his too quick excuses. The next morning, the story dominated the news. Neighbors whispered outside, their voices hushed but urgent. Emily stood on the porch listening as Mrs. Lang from across the street shook her head. "Such a tragedy," Mrs. Lang murmured to another woman. "Pretty girl like that. They say the police have no leads." Emily forced a nod, though her ears burned. She felt like a liar just standing there, knowing too much yet unable to voice it. Inside, Daniel sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when Emily entered. "Did you see the news?" she asked carefully. He glanced up, expression unreadable. "Yeah, terrible thing. People disappear all the time, though." His indifference chilled her. "All the time?" she echoed. Daniel shrugged. "World's dangerous. You can't get wrapped up in every headline." But Emily couldn't dismiss it. His tone was too casual, his focus too pointed on appearing unconcerned. She remembered how his eyes had flickered when she mentioned the smell of smoke, how quickly he had deflected her questions. "Where exactly was your meeting again?" she pressed. Daniel's smile thinned. "We've been through this, Emily. Why do you keep circling back? It's like you want there to be a problem." Her stomach sank, gaslighting again. He was pulling her doubts into the open only to twist them, to make her feel guilty for asking. She bit her tongue, choosing silence rather than another argument. She couldn't win, but silence didn't soothe her. It only deepened the gnawing sense that her husband was hiding something terrible. That night, Emily scrolled further into the article, digging through the comment threads. Someone mentioned seeing a man arguing with Hannah outside the cafe a week before she vanished. The description, tall, dark hair, sharp jawline, matched Daniel too closely for comfort. Emily closed the laptop with shaking hands. Her reflection, in the black screen, looked pale, haunted. The cracks in their marriage had widened into something she couldn't ignore. If Daniel was connected to Hannah's disappearance, then every moment Emily stayed in this house was a step closer to danger. Yet a part of her hesitated, because to admit it was to admit that the man she once trusted, the man she once loved, might not just be a liar, he might be a predator, and deep down she feared Hannah wasn't the first. The missing woman's face lingered in Emily's mind long after the news cycle shifted. Hannah Cole wasn't just a headline. She had become a silent presence in the house, a ghost Emily could not dismiss. Each time Daniel avoided her eyes or deflected her questions, Emily thought of Hannah's smile, her absence, and the gnawing possibility that her husband's shadow might stretch further than she ever dared imagine. One evening, unable to resist the pull of her unease, Emily went, searching through the drawers in Daniel's study. She told herself it was wrong, that spying would only widen the rift between them. But her fear pushed her past guilt. At first, she found nothing but old bills and contracts. Then, wedged between yellowing folders, she uncovered an envelope, stuffed with faded photographs and folded notes. Her fingers trembled as she spread them out across the desk. Among them was the face of a woman she didn't recognize, sharp-eyed, confident, smiling beside Daniel in younger days. The intimacy between them was undeniable. On the back of one photo, in hurried handwriting, was a name, Rachel. Emily read through the notes, fragments of old text messages printed out, their edges worn. Rachel's words were fiery, filled with accusations, passion, and pain. "You always think you can control me. I won't let you gaslight me anymore." Another read, "If you keep pushing, one of us is going to snap." Emily's breath caught. The words felt too familiar, echoing her own struggles with Daniel. The sound of the front door closing jolted her. She shoved the photos back into the envelope, barely returning them to the drawer before Daniel's footsteps approached. He entered the study. His shirt collar loosened, his expression tired but alert. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, voice calm but edged with suspicion. Emily forced a weak smile. "Looking for a pen." He studied her for a long moment, before crossing the room to kiss her cheek. The gesture was mechanical, almost mocking. "You don't need to dig through my things for that," he murmured. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Who's Rachel?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Daniel's eyes narrowed, the smile fading. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I saw her name." Emily's voice quivered but held steady. "Old photos, messages. You never mentioned her." For a heartbeat, the mask dropped. A flicker of something raw, anger, maybe fear, passed through his expression. Then just as quickly he smoothed it over with a laugh. "Rachel was nothing. Years ago. We had fights, sure, but it wasn't serious. You're reading too much into scraps of paper." Gaslighting again. Dismissing what she'd seen, rewriting history as if her eyes had betrayed her. But Emily knew better. The words on. Those notes had carried too much venom, too much warning. That night, lying awake beside him, she replayed Rachel's messages in her mind. "I won't let you gaslight me anymore. One of us is going to snap." The warnings were clear, like echoes sent across time, meant for Emily to hear. Her heart pounded as she realized something chilling. Rachel had tried to fight him, but she had disappeared from his life completely. There was no mention, no trace of her in all the years they'd been together. Emily turned her face toward the window, the moonlight casting thin stripes across the bed. She didn't dare move, didn't dare let Daniel sense her fear. But in the silence, a terrible thought bloomed. If Rachel had been erased so easily, what would happen to Emily if she pressed too hard? The past was no longer buried. It was seeping back into the present, carrying with it the stench of danger. And soon she would discover just how deep Daniel's shadows ran. The discovery of Rachel's name had left Emily sleepless for days. Every glance at Daniel felt like staring into the eyes of a stranger, one who carried ghosts with him, one who smiled too easily when questions rose. The more she tried to bury her fear, the sharper it grew, until even the smallest detail set, her nerves on edge. Late one evening, while Daniel was still at work, Emily wandered into the garage. The space smelled faintly of motor oil and damp wood, the concrete floor scattered with tools and cardboard boxes. She had avoided this place for years, leaving it to Daniel's control, but now curiosity pressed her forward. She moved box after box, searching without knowing what for. Then, near the back wall behind a stack of old paint cans, she noticed a weathered wooden chest. Its lid was secured with a simple latch, dusty as though untouched for years. Yet the lock felt warm under her fingers, as if recently handled. With trembling hands, Emily opened it. Inside lay a folded scarf, once white, now stained deep crimson. The fabric was stiff with dried blood. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. She lifted it carefully, the metallic scent faint but undeniable. Beneath it were scraps of paper, receipts, and something that looked like a broken bracelet. Each item screamed of another life, another woman's presence. Her chest heaved as she staggered back. "Oh, God," she whispered, voice cracking. In the empty garage, the sound of a car door slamming outside froze her. Daniel was home. Panicked, Emily shoved the scarf back into the chest and dropped the lid, dust clouding the air. She had barely stepped away when the garage door creaked open. Daniel entered, loosening his tie, his eyes narrowing when he saw her. "What are you doing out here?" Emily's voice shook. "Cleaning. I thought I'd organize some things." His gaze flicked to the chest. For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the air, heavy and suffocating. Then Daniel smiled faintly. "That's a first. You hate this garage." Emily swallowed hard, forcing steadiness. "I found something, a scarf with blood on it." The smile vanished. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "Emily, listen to yourself. A scarf? In an old box? Do you hear how paranoid you sound?" Her knees weakened. "I saw—" "Daniel." I held it in my hands. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair as though weary of her accusations. "This is what I mean. You twist everything. It's probably paint or rust or some junk I used to wipe my hands. But you want it to be something darker, don't you?" His words cut sharp, twisting the truth, making her doubt her own memory. Was it paint? Had she panicked too quickly? No, she could still smell the faint iron tang clinging to her skin. "Stop making me question myself," she whispered. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes cold now, his voice low and deliberate. "If you can't trust me, maybe you're the problem. Maybe your mind isn't as stable as you think." The suggestion hit her like a blow. He was turning it back on her again, planting seeds of madness in her head. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to scream. Emily turned away, her heart racing. She needed to keep calm, to play along, but inside her fear was coiling into resolve. The scarf had been real, the blood had been real, and no amount of manipulation could erase what she had seen. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm, almost warning. "You need rest. Stop digging into things that don't matter, it's hurting us." Emily forced herself to nod, though every nerve in her body screamed against it. He kissed her hair gently, as though sealing his dominance, then walked back into the house. She remained in the garage, shaking, staring at the chest. The box was more than a secret. It was proof. And if she didn't tread carefully, proof might be the very thing that destroyed her. The image of the bloodied scarf haunted Emily long after she left the garage. Even as she forced herself to smile through dinner, the memory clung to her, vivid and undeniable. But by the next morning, something strange happened. The chest in, the garage was gone. Emily rushed out before sunrise, her pulse hammering. The corner where the box had sat was now empty, the dust disturbed, faint drag marks etched into the concrete. She stood frozen, the cold air slicing her skin. When she confronted Daniel, he only smirked. "You dreamt it, Em. You've been under stress, that's all." "No. I saw it. I touched it," she insisted, her voice trembling. Daniel's eyes darkened with mock concern. "Do you hear yourself? First footsteps that weren't there, now boxes that disappear. I'm worried about you." The words cut deep. His tone carried no anger, only pity, as though he were talking to a fragile patient instead of his wife. Emily retreated, shaken. Had she really imagined it? She clenched her fists, trying to hold on to the certainty of what she had seen. The smell of iron, the stiff cloth beneath her fingers. It had been real. And yet, with every word Daniel spoke, that certainty cracked. Later that day, her phone suddenly shut down. When she tried to restart it, the screen flickered, displaying garbled static before going black. Daniel glanced at it, feigning innocence. Old phone. You should have replaced it months ago, he said. But she had charged it fully the night before. She knew the truth. He had sabotaged it. The device that connected her to the outside world, to help, was now useless. Emily's isolation deepened. Calls went unanswered, messages unsent. Daniel hovered closer, offering comfort that felt like a cage. He began leaving subtle remarks, planted like seeds in her mind. You've been forgetting things lately. You always get carried away with your imagination. Maybe you should see someone, a professional. At first she resisted, but the more he repeated it, the more doubt crept in. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, tired, almost unrecognizable. She pressed her palms against the sink, whispering to herself, I'm not crazy, I'm not. Still, the cracks in her confidence widened. Nights blurred into restless hours of questioning. Had she imagined Rachel's notes? Had Hannah's disappearance only coincided with Daniel's lies by chance? Was she inventing monsters out of the man she once loved? One evening, she found him sitting calmly at the dining table, sipping whiskey. His eyes glinted in the low light as he said, softly, You need help, Emily, you're not well. And if you keep going like this, people will start to notice. They'll wonder if you're fit to be trusted. Her chest tightened. The threat was wrapped in care, but the meaning was clear. He wasn't just dismissing her doubts. He was laying the foundation to destroy her credibility, to make her the unstable one. Emily forced a nod, concealing the storm inside her. But deep down, something shifted. For all his gaslighting, for all the cracks he tried to carve into her sanity, one truth remained solid. She wasn't imagining this. And if she couldn't convince herself, she would need someone else to believe. The next morning, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee cooling in her hands. Daniel had left early, muttering something about an urgent meeting, but his absence brought no peace. The silence pressed on her chest until she thought she might suffocate. The doorbell rang. The sound made her jolt, spilling coffee across the table. She wiped her hands quickly and went to the door. Standing there was a man in plain clothes, mid-40s, weathered face, eyes sharp and searching. Mrs. Lawson? Emily Lawson? Her throat tightened. Yes. He offered a badge. Detective. Harris. I'm following up on the disappearance of Hannah Cole. Do you have a few minutes? Her pulse thudded in her ears. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Daniel's looming figure in the hallway. But the house was empty. She stepped aside, ushering the detective in. They sat in the living room. Harris pulled a notebook from his jacket, flipping it open. His tone was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes carried the weight of years spent reading between the lines. You knew Hannah? He asked. Emily hesitated. Not well, I'd seen her around town. Daniel mentioned her once or twice. The detective's pen scratched across the page. When was the last time your husband saw her? Her mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed caution. She thought of Daniel's cold smile, the missing scarf, the way he had twisted her sanity into knots. Speaking felt like walking a tightrope with Daniel's shadow waiting below. I'm not sure, she whispered. He said he was away on business the night she disappeared. Harris studied her closely. And you believe him? The question cut deep. She lowered her eyes. I don't know. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Harris leaned forward. Mrs. Lawson, if there's something you're afraid to say, you can tell me. Off the record. Emily's hands shook. She wanted to spill everything. The footsteps, the scarf, Rachel's messages. But fear tightened. Her throat. What if Daniel found out she had spoken? He had already begun planting seeds of doubt about her sanity. If the police saw her as unstable, they might not believe her either. Instead, she forced composure. I don't have proof of anything. Just things don't add up. Harris nodded, scribbling something. Sometimes it starts with that, things that don't add up. If you remember anything, call me. He slid a card across the table. His gaze lingered on her, steady and deliberate. Trust your instincts, Mrs. Lawson. They're usually right. The words pierced through her haze of doubt like a lifeline. For the first time, someone wasn't dismissing her fears. A sound outside made her flinch. Tires crunching over gravel, Daniel's car pulling into the driveway. Her blood iced over. "You need to go," she whispered urgently. "Now!" Harris tucked his notebook away, rising smoothly. "I'll be in touch." He slipped out the back door just as the front door opened. Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hall. Emily pressed the detective's card against her chest, heart hammering, as Daniel entered the living room. His eyes flicked around, sharp and suspicious. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. Emily forced a shaky laugh. "Just the delivery guy. Wrong address." Daniel's gaze lingered on her, probing, before he nodded slowly. "Strange. I thought I saw someone leaving." Her fingers clenched around the card hidden in her pocket. Every word felt dangerous, every breath a gamble. She smiled thinly, pretending calm. Inside, though, a shift had begun. For the first time, she wasn't entirely alone. Someone believed in the cracks she saw, in the shadows Daniel cast. And now, the danger of speaking had doubled, because Daniel would do anything to keep her silent. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Detective Harris's words echoed in her head. "Trust your instincts." She clutched his card beneath her pillow as though it were a shield. But even with that fragile comfort, she felt Daniel's presence lingering in every shadow of the house. The next morning, she slipped out under the pretense of grocery shopping. The air outside felt fresher, freer, though the weight of her secret made each step heavy. She drove to a small cafe across town, where Claire, her oldest friend, was already waiting in the corner booth. Claire's eyes widened as Emily slid into the seat. "You look pale. What's going on?" Emily hesitated, the words tangled in her throat. But then they spilled out. The footsteps, the scarf, the detective, Daniel's constant gaslighting. Claire listened, her face tightening with every detail. When Emily finally stopped, Claire leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's something you don't know. I wasn't sure I should say anything, but after hearing this..." Emily's breath caught. "What is it?" Claire glanced around the cafe, then whispered, "I saw Daniel with Hannah, a week before she went missing. They were outside the cafe downtown. He had her by the arm. It didn't look friendly." The words hit Emily like a blow. "You're sure?" "I'm positive. I almost called you, but I thought maybe I was overreacting. Now I regret staying quiet." Emily's hands shook around her coffee cup. The puzzle pieces she had tried to deny were sliding into place. Daniel's lies, the smoke, the missing box, now this. Claire gripped her wrist firmly. "Emily, you have to get out. This isn't just marital problems. This is dangerous. If he's capable of hurting her, he could hurt you, too." Tears stung Emily's eyes. "I know, but leaving him, it isn't that simple. He watches everything I do. He twists everything until I can't even trust myself." "What if I try to leave and he finds out?" Claire's voice softened. "Then you need help. Call that detective. Let him protect you. Don't stay in that house, not another night." Emily looked down at the card in her pocket, her lifeline. Yet her chest ached with conflict. Marriage had been her anchor, even as it dragged her into darkness. She remembered the man Daniel used to be, the warmth, the laughter, and for one cruel moment she wanted to believe he could still be that man. But Claire's words shattered that illusion. "Please, Em, don't wait until it's too late." The cafe door opened and Emily stiffened, half expecting to see Daniel's silhouette in the frame, but it was only a stranger. Still, the fear clung to her, reminding her that every secret meeting was a risk. She forced a nod, her voice unsteady. "I'll think about it." Claire's eyes filled with frustration and fear. "Don't just think, act." Emily drove home. In silence, Claire's warning echoing louder than the hum of the engine. When she pulled into the driveway, Daniel's car was already there. His shadow moved past the curtains inside, waiting. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, trembling. The truth was closing in on her, tightening like a noose, and she knew Daniel wouldn't be able to hide his secrets forever. The house was wrapped in darkness, the kind of silence that pressed against Emily's ears until even her heartbeat felt too loud. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, every muscle taut with dread. Daniel had been quiet all evening, quieter than usual. He'd eaten his dinner without a word, sipped his whiskey, and disappeared into his study. It was well past midnight when she heard the creak of the floorboards outside their bedroom. Daniel entered, his silhouette framed in the doorway. He looked different, unsteady, his eyes rimmed red, his shirt half-buttoned. He sank into the chair by the window and rubbed his face with both hands. "Emily," he said softly, his voice cracked with something she couldn't immediately name. "I don't think I can carry this anymore." Her chest tightened. She sat up slowly. "Carry what?" He stared at the carpet, his hands trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't supposed to go that far." Her blood ran cold. She kept her voice measured. "What do you mean, Daniel?" He leaned back, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Hannah. She was hysterical. I tried to calm her down, but she fought me. She slipped, hit her head. It was an accident, Emily, an accident." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The words echoed, monstrous in their simplicity. He had admitted it. Not everything, but enough. Her hands shook as she slid one beneath the blanket, gripping the phone she had tucked there earlier. With a quiet movement, she tapped record. "Why didn't you go to the police?" she whispered. Daniel's gaze snapped to her, sharp and wounded. "Because they'd never believe me. They'd twist it, make me out to be some monster. You don't understand. If I go down, everything we've built goes down with me. Our marriage. Our life." Her heart pounded. "So you hid it?" He swallowed hard, his jaw clenching. "I had no choice. You think you'd survive out there without me? You need me, Emily. We need each other." The phone trembled in her grip as it captured every word. Each sentence was both a confession and a threat, laced with the same manipulation he had always used to keep her tethered. Then, as if sensing the shift in the air, Daniel narrowed his eyes. His voice dropped to a low growl. "What are you holding?" Emily froze. He lunged across the room, ripping the blanket away. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. His face twisted with fury as he saw the glowing screen. "You were recording me?" he roared. Emily scrambled backward, her body pressed against the headboard. "I had to. No one would believe me otherwise." He seized the phone, smashing it against the wall. The pieces scattered across the carpet like broken glass. His chest heaved, his shadow looming over her. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was deadly calm now, more terrifying than his shouting. "You think you can trap me, make me your villain? You're not innocent here, Emily. You push and you pry and then you wonder why things spiral." Her eyes burned with tears. "You killed her. Don't twist this into my fault." For a moment the mask slipped completely. His features hardened into something cold, predatory. Then he leaned in, close enough for her to feel his breath. "If you ever try something like that again, you won't live to regret it." The threat hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Daniel stood abruptly, his composure snapping back into place like a mask. He left the room without another word, leaving Emily trembling in the silence, her phone destroyed, her evidence gone. But the recording had burned itself into her memory, every word etched into her soul. He could smash devices, twist truths, break her down piece by piece. But she had heard his confession, and sooner or later the world would hear it too. The house felt like a cage after Daniel's midnight outburst. Emily barely slept, every creak of the floorboard sending her heart into her throat. She replayed his words again and again. "If you ever try something like that again, you won't live to regret it." The threat clung to her skin like smoke, impossible to wash away. By morning, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He brewed coffee, read the paper, even hummed under his breath. But beneath the calm surface, his eyes tracked her every move. Emily stayed silent, afraid that the wrong word might ignite him again. That evening, the tension finally snapped. Emily found the broken pieces of her phone swept into the trash, buried under coffee grounds. Fury overtook her fear. She marched into the study, her voice shaking with both terror and resolve. You can destroy phones, Daniel, but you can't destroy the truth. He looked up slowly from his desk, his expression darkening. Truth? You wouldn't know truth if it stared. You in the face. Emily's voice cracked but held firm. You admitted it. You killed Hannah. You told me everything. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. His eyes flared with rage, then narrowed with something colder. He rose from his chair, towering over her. And who would believe you? Everyone knows you're unraveling. You've been paranoid for months. You'd sound insane. Her pulse thundered as he stepped closer. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall. His hand slammed against the plaster beside her head, trapping her in place. You're mine, Emily, he hissed. If you ruin me, I'll take you down with me. Panic surged through her. She shoved against him with all her strength. The suddenness caught him off guard. He stumbled, knocking over a lamp. The crash filled the house with shattering glass. Emily bolted for the door. Daniel lunged, his fingers grazing her arm, but she tore free and sprinted down the hallway. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she fled toward the garage, the memory of the bloodied scarf flashing in her mind. She grabbed the car keys, fumbling as Daniel's footsteps thundered behind her. Then, a sudden pounding on the front door. Daniel froze, his head snapping toward the sound. Emily froze, too, keys clutched in her trembling hands. Police! Voice barked. Open up, Detective Harris. Relief flooded Emily's chest. Daniel cursed under his breath. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. He turned to her, voice low and venomous. Say one word and it's over for you. But his composure was cracking. Harris's pounding grew louder. Emily darted into the living room, yanking the door open. Detective Harris and two uniformed officers pushed inside. Daniel stood frozen at the base of the stairs, his fists clenched, his breath ragged. Daniel Lawson? Harris said firmly. We need to ask you some questions about Hannah Cole. Emily watched as Daniel's mask shattered completely. Without a word, he bolted toward the back door. The officers lunged after him, but not before a small object slipped from Daniel's pocket and clattered to the floor. Harris scooped it up, a silver bracelet delicate smeared with something dark. Emily's knees gave out. She sank onto the couch, her body trembling as Harris knelt beside her. You're safe now, he said gently. We've got him, but Emily knew better. Daniel wasn't caught yet. He was out there, running, desperate. And a desperate man was more dangerous than ever. The walls of the house seemed to breathe with the violence that had almost consumed her. For Emily, there was no going back. The breaking point had passed. The final reckoning was coming. Daniel's capture came 3 days later. The police found him hiding in an abandoned cabin at the edge of the woods, clothes torn, eyes wild. The man who had once seemed untouchable, composed and calculated, was dragged out in handcuffs, his face pale with fury. Emily watched the footage on the evening news, her breath catching in her chest. It was over, or at least that was what everyone told her. But nothing about it felt finished. The trial unfolded in a whirlwind of weeks. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, flashing cameras capturing Emily's every step as she entered under police escort. The woman once hidden in shadows was now the reluctant centerpiece of a true crime spectacle. Inside the courtroom, the truth was laid bare in fragments, each more damning than the last. Forensic evidence tied the bracelet found in Daniel's pocket directly to Hannah Cole. Witnesses testified to his volatile temper. And finally, Rachel's name resurfaced, an old flame who had vanished quietly, leaving behind whispers of bruises and screaming arguments. Detective Harris testified with calm precision, detailing the inconsistencies in Daniel's alibis, the timeline that placed him with Hannah on the night she disappeared, and the physical evidence that could no longer be denied. But it was Emily's testimony that silenced the room. She stood trembling in the witness box, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. She spoke of the footsteps in the empty house, the bloodied scarf, the manipulation, the confession whispered in the dead of night. Daniel's eyes burned into her from across the room. When she faltered, his gaze seemed to will her back into silence. But for once, she didn't yield. He told me it was an accident, she said, her voice breaking but firm. But you don't hide an accident. You don't bury the truth unless you know what you've done is unforgivable. The courtroom hung in silence. Even the scratch of pens ceased. Daniel erupted, slamming his fists against the table. "She's lying. She's always been unstable. Everyone knows it." The judge's gavel cracked against the wood, but the damage was done. His rage had betrayed him, the calm mask stripped away for all to see. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty of murder, guilty of obstruction, guilty of lies that had cost a young woman her life. When the sentence was read, Emily felt no triumph, only an ache so deep it seemed carved into her bones. Daniel was led away in chains, his glare fixed on her until the doors closed behind him. In the weeks that followed, Emily returned to the house that had once been her sanctuary. The rooms were still and hollow, haunted by memories that refused to fade. She stood in the garage one evening, staring at the empty corner where the box had been. The ghosts of Rachel and Hannah seemed to linger there, silent witnesses to everything she had survived. Neighbors offered sympathy, reporters begged for interviews, but Emily declined them all. Her life, once filled with love and trust, was now a graveyard of secrets. Yet something had changed. For years, Daniel had silenced her, twisting her reality, making her doubt her own voice. But in court, she had spoken. She had been heard. As she sat by the window one quiet night, the town outside settling into sleep, Emily whispered to herself, "The truth doesn't heal, but silence destroys." And though her life would never be the same, though the scars of betrayal ran deeper than she could bear, she had broken free of his silence. For the first time in years, she belonged to herself.